Okay, let me talk a little bit more about some more color effect. Most of the video editing applications have some kind of a way of adjusting the color of your video footage. Most of the video footage I shoot is not color balanced at the very beginning. Some of the cameras do a good job of getting it close, but a lot of it tends to not have enough contrast, or it's a little dark, or it's a little too bright, and it's easier to take a dark one and make it brighter than to take something that's overexposed and try and darken it down. So I'm going to show you some of the common ones that I use and things like that. Again, I just have some basic footage that I have in here. Again, some more of my Columbia video, I don't know, some ants crawling on the ground. The footage is not important at this point. What is really important is some of the filters that I'm going to use. Now, if we look at this footage, it's kind of fun, it's interesting, but it's a little bit plain. So I might want to brighten this up a little bit. So let's just go through and let's look at some of the filters I might use, and then we'll talk about some fun filters and things like that. So again, in most video editing applications, in this case I'm in Premiere and Final Cut, there's a lot of wonderful filters. I used a lot of them, and you might see some samples of my Final Cut filters that I use. But here in Premiere, under Video Effects, again, it's under the Effects window. Under Video Effects, we have a lot of different ones. Let's first, I'm going to twirl down the triangle for the video effects. I have a video in the timeline. How you use an effect is you drag it from the effect window onto your clip in the timeline, and it'll apply the effect. Once you apply the effect, then there's a variety of different controls you can use under the effects controls to either adjust it more or less, usually. Some of the ones I use a lot in video effects, I use auto color a lot. I really do, because a lot of the video footage I shoot is not in the appropriate color, and I might even use this on a photograph I've taken that was not color balanced either. You might take a photo of something that was not color balanced, and boom, you put on the auto color, and it tends to help a lot. So let's just drag it on. Let's see what it does. And you'll notice right away. And let me make this window a little bigger so you can see it. It tends to do a really good job. Again, it's called auto color. You'll see before, after, before, after. Now, before this was shot, this video footage was shot towards a dark time of the day. It was sort of late in the day, like around 4 or 5 o'clock. And the sun's kind of going down. It's in the shadows. It's got this kind of blue that the colors you get from shooting at that time tend to be, especially if you're in the shadows. And so by putting on the auto color, it kind of put a little bit of warmth in there, and it does a really good job. Now, if you put the auto color on and it's a little bit too much, there's a blend with original option inside of Premiere, blend with original. And what that does is it tends to then it's taking the filter and sort of like turning it off a little bit, so I use it a lot, actually, blend with original a lot, just to make sure that it doesn't do too much color correction if it's doing too much. And that's a great filter. Again, it's called auto color. It works really well. I'm going to leave that one on because I like that one for now. Another one I like to use, and let me make this a little bigger here so you can see it. I'm sorry, I don't have a very big window here. Auto contrast, I tend not to use that one too much. Again, it does what it says. It increases the contrast, and you can see before and after. Well, that actually turned out pretty well. And again, you have a blend with original, which will then allow the effect to be a little bit less. Auto levels, I don't use a lot. I love levels in Photoshop. Levels I use on almost every photograph in Photoshop, but here in Premiere, even if you'd use the levels that you can adjust, if I take that one and put it on there, it's just it's not like you see it inside of Photoshop where you have the histogram. If you've ever used levels in Photoshop, you got something called a histogram, which shows you the darks and lights of each of the levels inside of the image, and you're able to go and adjust it. Here, it's just so different. It's so different. You got to adjust the color. You got different input, output. It's very hard for me to visually see it, so I tend not to use that one. Lighting effects does what it says. It'll add a light kind of like it does in Photoshop, and you can adjust it. You can move it around if you want inside of there. You can actually add more lights. You can do all kinds of lights. I don't really have a lot of time to show you lighting effects. I think you might want to try it again. It does like it does in Photoshop. It's like adding a light to your video. It's really kind of cool. Great way to highlight somebody's face maybe if you shot something. You want to highlight an area. You can actually, one of the things you can do is you can actually adjust these effects by using the keyframes inside of Premiere here under the effects control. All of these things can be keyframed, so I can even keyframe the color of the light itself. What I mean by that is, if you saw my previous videos, in the effects controls here I can hit the stopwatch, and right now the light is white, but if I can move it down, I hit the stopwatch, put a keyframe there, move it down a little bit, insert another keyframe right here, and I can adjust the color to something else. And so you can see it'll go from white to red, and then I can adjust it again, putting another keyframe in there, change the color again, and it'll go from one color to the other to the other. So the cool thing about each one of these effects inside of Premiere here is that you can keyframe them all again under the effects control window. You're just going to have to go through and try the lighting effects. There's a lot of things you can control. You can see you can increase the contrast, you can rotate it, just like it is in Photoshop. So you might want to practice in Photoshop first and then try it inside of Premiere. That way you're not having to deal with the motion at the same time. So I'm going to delete that for now, just showing you that one because it was there. The Pro Amp, I'm not really sure how that works. But the one I use a lot here is this one, the shadow and highlight. It works like it does inside of Photoshop. What it can do is increase the darks in the shadow and the lights in the light. So if you have something that's kind of dark, the light and shadow is a great way to increase certain areas. It works like it does inside of Photoshop. There's ways to adjust it, and again, there's a blend with the original. So if I turned all of them off, let's see, this was the original footage. Kind of plain, but I added, again, color correcting, added a little warmth to it, contrast, added a little contrast in it, and shadow and highlights, added a little bit more to the dark areas and brightened them up a little bit more. Really, now I can see the what's going on in this video a lot better. Now it's going to render really slow because you know, it's got too many things going on now with all the filters in there. So keep that in mind when you're working inside an application, that, you know, as you add these effects to it, it will tend to slow down whatever you're doing. So let me delete these so you get an idea of, there you go. So that is one that's just under adjust right there under video effects in there. Of course, you have your blur and sharpen. If you have a video that's kind of blurred and you want to sharpen a little bit, the one I use is called the unsharp mask. If I apply that to there, the beauty of the unsharp mask compared to some of the other ones is you're able to adjust the amount, and you can see before and after. You can see it really sharpens up. I know you probably can't see it here in the video that I'm showing you right now, and you know, it's very hard for me to demonstrate some of these things because of the quality of the video, but you can really see when I do the unsharp mask, you can see all the rocks and everything are all sharpened up inside here, and again, it's gonna go really slow. But again, unsharp mask works fairly well, and there's a way to adjust it, and there's some threshold in there, so that one's a really good one. And so you can see what it looks like when I delete it. So instead of using sharpen, which doesn't have adjustments, the unsharp mask does have adjustments. Just the same with the blur. You want to use the Gaussian blur so you can adjust. If you want to blur something, you can use the Gaussian blur. A great way to do a transition from one area of your video to another is to have a blur. And what you can do is you can actually keyframe these inside of the program. So, you know, in this case, I could start with a very blurry video. Again, you have a stopwatch inside of Premiere to do that. And then I can go down here and turn off the blur. So a kind of cool blur transition. You can make your own blur transition where you blur the beginning of the clip and then towards the end it's not in blur. So you're kind of faking kind of the focus or blurring that you could do in your camera right inside the program, again, by using one of the effects. It was called Gaussian blur. It's a good one. So those are the ones under blur and effects. Channels can tell, usually used to adjust the color balance maybe. The better one is the color correction. The color corrector is a great one to use. Again, you have a brightness contrast in there. You got broadcast colors. Of course, what that'll do, the broadcast colors will kind of fake. If you see the reading that I had this week, there was some reading, or not really reading, but there was a video that I posted this week of something I did several years ago about how to adjust your colors for broadcast or delivery. And it talks about adjusting the black areas and the white areas so they fall within the broadcast standards. Well, if you use the broadcast colors, it kind of forces the video to fit within those standards, and you can actually go and adjust them, the signal and everything there. So that's what that one is. Change color does what it says and things like that. The one I tend to use, and the one that's probably the best underneath the color correction, is called the three-way color corrector. What the three-way color... remember, we skipped one, I'm sorry. Remember the Lumina curve I just showed in the last video? Let's try that one first, and then we'll come to the three-way color corrector. I kind of skipped this one. Again, the Lumina curve is the one I used in the previous video in this series here that allows me to give the film look. If you remember, I used this in the previous video. And if I put on the Lumina curve, what the Lumina curve is a great way to give you what we call the film look. And how we do that is the Lumina curve will give, what you're looking at here is a straight diagonal line here. And what you do is you want to give it an S-curve. So if you put a dot along the line and drag to the right, it's increasing the brightness. And if you click along the bottom and drag to the left here, it's increasing darkness. So what you're doing is you're increasing the brightness here and the darkness, and it gives you more of a contrast. But it's a little bit different than using the brightness contrast, because this is giving it to you on a curve, which is a little bit smoother, which will give you more of what we call the film look. This is more high contrast. If you look at the movies at the movie theater, they're very kind of high contrast. And so, again, that was called the Lumina curve. You might want to try that to give yourself a film look. Probably the best color corrector is called the three-way color corrector inside of Premiere here. If I put that onto a clip, what it does is it'll show me the midtones, the bright tones, the highlights, midtones, and shadows. So let's say your shadows are a little bit too blue. You can warm them up by dragging towards the spectrum. Again, you have a color wheel here. And if your midtones are a certain temperature, you can adjust those, as well as your lightness. In addition, you can actually use the eyedropper to come up and suck up an area, and what that does is it'll then tend to adjust the colors for that area to whatever you have clicked on. I don't know, I'll have to try and explain that a little bit differently in another video. But this one's a very good option to try, just to do some color correcting. Again, you can also use this for the film look. I've seen people use this for film look to add contrast like you see here, as well as adjusting the colors. So sharpening this and probably adding some contrast, we can make this definitely look more like a film look here. Again, the three-way color corrector is a very good one. I think I noticed that one. Tint does what it says. It'll add a tint to your video. Well, actually added a black and white. There you go. And then, of course, if you make it black and white, you add a bunch of contrast to it, brightness contrast, and we'll definitely add some contrast, add some brightness. There we go. There we got some black and white film look right there. Again, brightness, contrast, and tint. Very interesting. It's a look like black and white film. Well, those are some of them there. Image control, I use it for the gamma correction mostly. In that one, if I put it on there, it allows you to adjust the gamma, which would adjust the brightness basically of the whole video, the entire video. So unlike doing brightness contrast, would adjust both darks and lights, this adjusts everything. So if you go up, it's going to get everything darker. If you go down, it makes everything lighter. I use it to, if I shot something that's too dark, you just turn the gamma down a little bit there, and you'll see before, after, before, after. Brightens everything up. It's a way to do universal kind of color correcting. So there's a whole bunch in here, as well as in iMovie. There's a whole bunch of different ones too. What you're looking for if you want to get yourself the film look, or to make it look more like a movie theater, is to increase the contrast. Mostly the video tends to be there, as well as reduce some of the color a little bit. Film isn't a saturated color that you see in a movie theater is that what you would see in video. Video is very colorful. So those are some of the effects I would use. The last thing I wanted to show was, if you saw in the movie there, the example of the movie that we had previously, I said, I took a frame of the last video and I put it in my video and then I faded it out, if you saw that. To do that, at least in Premiere, there's like a little camera over in the preview window here. That little camera will make a still image. So if I click on that camera, it'll say, hey, you want to name this still image? What I'm doing is I'm taking a picture of the screen there. So I can just take a picture of the screen there and say the ants, whatever you want to give it a call. It'll put it in the folder wherever you want it to go. Let's say I want to put it in my I'm just going to throw it on desktop for right now. And I'm going to hit OK. Of course, I probably would not want to do that if I was making a movie that I wanted to keep, because you want to keep all the pieces together. But in this case, I just do it on my desktop. I'm going to import it. Again, it's a DPX is the file that it makes when you use that little camera option in the preview. And what it's doing is just taking a picture of the screen right there, and you'll see I have a still image or a picture or that frame. It's exporting that frame. Now, if you don't change the actual from the DPX, so if you want to bring this into Photoshop and make adjustments to it and things like that, it's all good, but make sure it stays in the DPX format. Once you change it out of there, the colors will get all shifted. So stay in a DPX format if you want to keep it. And I have it really thin here, and so I can stretch my still image out for as long as I want. So again, my ants are crawling, boom, the last frame, it stops. And then again, I could add my video, or my video transition at the very end here, cross dissolve at the very end, and it'll then, so at the end of my movie, ants crawling, boom, there's a still image, and then it fades out at the end. That way you're not fading to the video at the end. So, those are some effects that I use inside of this program, and I'm sure you can find them in other programs too.